So this will be my second video on an examination of US voodoo, and this will be on basically what's called an occult pharmacopoeia, I'll call it. One of the interesting things about voodoo is, despite the savagery of it and despite the craziness of it, the wild dancing, the erratic behavior, the trance-like states, etc., there is a whole hell of a lot of knowledge that goes into the chemistry of enchantment in voodoo. Far more than one would notice in, say, Wicca. And I want to do a quick comparison of the two. Wicca, which is Western magic, which is essentially, in its truest sense, a recreation of Anglo-Saxon traditions, is not really so much about spellcasting, although it did become that way later, especially in the 1960s onward. It was more of a religion than a witchcraft, than a craft of sorts. Although sometimes that did play a role in. But with Wicca, when you see the use of herbs and things like that, it's more for the magical properties of the herbs. And that's in voodoo too, and in HooDoo, HooDoo being the magical technology of voodoo. But also with voodoo, you see a use of herbs, animal parts, things of that nature, not simply for the magical properties, but for the pharmaceutical properties, the pharmacokinetic properties that they elicit upon the organism. This is Tetrodotoxin is one of the best known, which is used in zombification. Now, as far as I know, there isn't zombification that takes place in the United States, but in Haiti, zombification is real and very feared. I've worked with people from Haiti, born-again Christians, most of them, because they believe that by converting to born-again Christianity and away from Catholicism. See, this is what people also don't understand. Most voodoos, practitioners of voodoo, are devoutly Catholic. Okay, and that's something that I think people don't grasp. Like, people don't understand that voodoo doesn't simply live alongside Christianity. It lives intertwined with Christianity. It is Christianity. I dealt with this prior in another video when I was talking about how Catholicism, or Catholic, means comprised of many bodies, or comprised of many churches. The Catholic Church is made up of many churches, many denominations within the denomination. And voodoo is one such denomination, which is a blending of West African tradition and Catholicism. And this is well known, and many of these people are devoutly Catholic that practice voodoo. But voodoo is decidedly what most people would consider anti-Christian or devil worship, but it's not. It's not. Although I would question the morality and the consistency with which most voodoo practitioners adhere to their Catholic beliefs. But the academic knowledge, I will say, and it's not even academic knowledge because it's hand down, but the knowledge of pharmacokinetics, not in the truest sense, like not in the intricate sense, but in the sense that we know, like in their sense, this does this if you put this much of this in this and then use it to do that. One of the most common things, the true gopher dust. Gopher dust is similar to, like, it's a powder that causes torment. Some of the things in it are, actually medicinal herbs and insect parts and things of that nature, which will irritate the skin and cause people to lose their minds, essentially. Tetrodotoxin, which comes from the pufferfish and is used in zombification, is a real thing. It is used in surgery as a form of anesthesia. It is used to put people into a state between life and death. And that's exactly what it is used for in Haiti. It takes people to the point where you cannot tell if they are alive or dead. This happens in Japan with relative frequency, especially back in the day when more pufferfish was eaten, fugu it's called, to the point where they had a whole system to determine whether the person was really dead or not. Now, the pharmacopia practices, I will say, of voodoo makes use of botanical substances, vegetable substances, roots, berries, nuts, seeds, etc., animal substances, insect parts, reptile parts, amphibian parts, fish parts, etc., mammal parts, of course. It also makes use of various minerals, calcium carbonate, eggshell powder, different types of like dolomite, baking sodium bicarbonate, etc. These are things that you do not really see used in Western Wicca, okay? But you do see these used with quite frequency in voodoo and in hoodoo and in mountain magic and things of that nature. So I would say what's interesting is, despite the way that people look down on voodoo as a sort of savage, brutal religion, it is in many ways, but it makes use of knowledge that the average Western witch, the average Wiccan, has no knowledge of. And I wanted to talk about various root doctors. Now, a root doctor or witch doctor is somebody that uses voodoo, basically, the practices of witchcraft, essentially, to cause healing in one's patient. And one of my ancestors, Hiram Page, who was one of the people that witnessed the golden plates and all that from Mormonism, he was a root doctor. Other root doctors and witch doctors, of course, Marie Laveau, the famous voodoo queen, and then of course there was Bayou John, or Dr. John, who was from Senegal. Now he was interesting because he owned his own slaves. He would use them. He would sell their services, and he would use them to spy on the elites of Louisiana. And then he would take that back, and it would get to the point, and this is what you have to understand, with a lot of occultism comes a lot of trickery, in the sense that he had people believing that he could read their minds, when in reality it was basic espionage. It was basic intelligence gathering. His people were gathering intelligence from the elites, and then he was using that to blackmail the elites. But this does not take away from the realness of this guy's ability to understand how to use these substances, herbal substances, animal substances, mineral substances, etc., to cause change to occur in conformity with one's will. In this way, you could see science, you could see magic. A lot of people refer to magic as the science of causing change to occur in conformity with one's will. Not really. Not really. In many ways, magic is engineering. It follows the engineering process in many ways, in the sense that you're causing change to occur in conformity with one's will. You're not simply observing natural phenomenon. You're actively using observed natural phenomenon, knowledge that you have gathered from other people's observations and your own observations, and using that to cause change to occur in conformity with one's will. Essentially, you are engineering an outcome with your knowledge of what does what, and how to do it, and how to make what do what. Now, as I said, one of the things that drew me to the 8 Laws of Health, the Adventist 8 Laws of Health, and eventually to Biologic Living, Dr. Kellogg's Biologic Living, is the sense that, I've always been driven to, and this is the thing, well, first I'll finish this. I've always been drawn more to personal training, physical excellency, eugenics, understanding things that way, and then using that to cause change to occur in conformity with one's will. I've never really been too drawn to too deeply to the occult, too deeply to otherworldly experiences. It's never really enticed me as much as understanding flesh and blood reality as it is. Okay, the carnal reality the way it is. And in many ways, I've never been truly drawn to the occult except for the sense of as a means of camaraderie, as a means of meeting people of similar interest, of a means of meeting people with similar intellectual pursuits, things of that nature. But I've never been drawn to occultism for any deep mystical experience, because a lot of that, like the stuff that I've done, like yoga and tantric yoga, meditation, things like that, these are all physiological states that are gained through meditative practices which take advantage of the physiological happenings of the organism. These are not mystical things. These are things that have been called mystical states that are not really mystical states. They're physiological states. Voodoo practitioners make use of this knowledge. You will find it will not be uncommon. We actually, in a local Presbyterian church where in the area where I live, there is a voodoo queen, I guess you would call her, but she's a practitioner of voodoo that sells things from the church. And that's the thing is, like I said, voodoo and Christianity go hand in hand, mostly with Catholicism, but also with other forms of Christianity. But it's not uncommon to find a voodoo practitioner that's trained in traditional Chinese medicine, in homeopathy, in the use of the tissue salts from homeopathy. These things are all too common in the practice of voodoo. Now, in fairness, a lot of times these are used to heal. Now, apart from that, you have all sorts of the magical reality of voodoo. The magical properties that go along with the physiological pharmacokinetic properties of these substances. And that's where it gets really, really interesting, because what people don't understand, magic, as I've said before, magic is kind of like a natural science that's never been explored. So what do I mean by that? I just got done saying that magic is actually more like engineering, because you're using this knowledge that has been gained by past experiences from previous generations and previous people, and your own experiences with experimentation, etc. And then you're using that to engineer an outcome to cause change to occur in conformity with your will. Yes, but magic as a science, okay, see, that's magic in practice. Magic in theory is a science. Magic in theory is based on these naturalistic observations of subtle energies, of this reality within reality, this reality that is never explored, never taken into consideration, that does exist. That is, it's experiential. You can experience it. And if you practice magic, you will experience it. I've experienced this type of thing during the practice of magical ritual, when I practiced ritual magic on a basis more readily than I do now. I don't really practice ritual magic too often, but it's definitely, you're capable of experiencing it. You're capable of sensing it. You're capable of seeing it in some instances. You're capable of smelling it. You can experience it with your senses. Okay? However, to the non-practitioner or the person not actually practicing it, they do not experience it. So it is but however, there are people that are present that will experience it without knowledge of you. Like, they can experience what is happening, they can see what is happening, they can smell what is happening, you can taste what is happening. There are times when I have been practicing magical ritual. People that are not familiar with survivalism or outdoorsmanship might not be familiar, like, if all your hair stands up, the hair on your head, the hair on your neck, the hair on your arms, etc., this is a sign that you're about to be struck by lightning if you're outside. I've experienced this in a completely closed room practicing magical ritual. This is, in my opinion, due to the bioenergetic properties of magical practice. And it is very real. It's not just me that's experienced it, it's other people that have been in the ritual chamber and things of that nature. Now, this is not voodoo, because what I practiced, I've never actually practiced voodoo, although I have made use of the formulations and things of that nature in the past, and I don't use animal substances, but mineral and vegetable substances I have used in the past to work change to occur in conformity with my will. And that is what magic is. Now, the thing is, when you start getting into this unseen aspect of reality that is very real, and that's what I don't understand. I don't like when people try to say supernatural or supernormal or things like, because these things are not supernatural. They're just not paid attention to. That's the thing, that the one problem you have with magic is that people, the scientific community says it does not happen. Okay? It does not happen. That's just what they say. It does not happen. And if it does happen, they will find a way to explain it away. Okay? To make you think that it does not happen, even though they know it happens, because they don't want to know it happens. So they will find a way to explain it away. Oh, it's mental illness. Oh, you never had cancer to begin with. Oh, this never happened. You didn't have an autoimmune disease that went into remission after somebody did this. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Okay, so they find ways to explain away the reality, the observable reality that is the end product of the magical working. But in reality, it is true. It is real. It is experience. You experience it. You see it. You sense it. You taste it. You feel it. It is very real. Okay? So it is reality on a more subtle level that humans are not necessarily capable of observing. Now, certain animals, such as bats and cetaceans like dolphins and whales, they have echolocation. They can use sound generated from their brain or from other places to see without their eyes. They see with their mind. Okay? So there are other animals like sharks and birds and things like that that use electromagnetic fields to see and to sense. Humans have lost this ability over many millennia. This is the thing, like, people don't understand this. Guinea pigs, fruit bats, and humans do not make their own vitamin C. That's why guinea pigs, fruit bats, and great apes and monkeys and such are used to research vitamin C, because they don't make it. Why don't they make it? Because they didn't have to make it. Eventually their bodies adapted to not making it, because generally speaking, humans, guinea pigs, fruit bats, monkeys, and great apes eat a whole hell of a lot of vegetation, where they get their vitamin C from. However, if you look at, for example, dogs and cats and other animals that make vitamin C, you probably, and I want to make sure people understand this, I'm not a doctor, okay? I'm not a doctor, I'm not a, nothing like that. I'm not trying to diagnose, treat, or do anything. But when you look at other animals that make their vitamin C, it seems that humans are extremely low on the level of how much they really should be getting. Because vitamin C is really more like a hormone in other animals, in other mammalian species. Okay? So that was an idea of Linus Pauling. Now, our senses, these sixth senses, this idea that the sixth sense does not exist, or that it does exist even. Well, what is it? Well, that depends on what you think it is, okay, or what it really is, or what it is in this particular species. For example, in a bat, in a dolphin, in a whale, it's echolocation. In a shark, it's the ability to sense the magnetic field of the earth. It changes based on the species. I always like to say that the sixth sense is the five senses, but put together with the mind, put together with intuition. And this is kind of where the understanding of magic comes in, the understanding of the will of God. And this is, people don't grasp this. People want to make this seem unholy or holy, etc. God is not holy or unholy. God simply is. And that's why I adopt a pantheistic interpretation of God. anybody that understands the original Judaic understanding of God understands God is not good or evil. God simply is. He is. And that's why I think there needs to be a better understanding, and it's not even a he. God is not a he. In the Kabbalistic understanding of God, God is a force. God is everything. God is beyond everything. God is nothing and everything all at once. If you look at the invocation of the Bornless One, you will understand that. And this is where people fail. This is where Western magic fails, where voodoo and other primeval forms of magic succeed. Is their understanding of these things more in depth, more real. It's a more real understanding, a flesh and blood understanding of reality that is missing from the Western esoteric tradition. However, the problem is a lot of people don't understand that you can gain this understanding without acting like a lunatic, without fully succumbing to the savagery and brutality of, say, voodoo. Okay, and that's what is problematic, and this is where there needs to be more delving, in my opinion, with the Western esoteric tradition. There needs to be more delving into Tantra, more delving into meditation, and a hell of a lot more delving into the physicality of life, diet, exercise, supplementation, the use of the 8 laws of health, Ellen G. White and Dr. Kellogg's 8 laws of health, biologic living. This is how you regain these understandings that were lost. One of the things that's interesting is, like in Ellen G. White and Dr. Kellogg's opinion, God does not choose to reside, and I don't believe this because I believe God resides everywhere. I just believe, and I will state this, in Ellen G. White and Dr. Kellogg's opinion, if you're heavily caffeinated or on street drugs or stimulants or intoxicated with alcohol, etc., your perception of God is distorted. Your perception of reality, which is God, is distorted. Now, Ellen G. White and Dr. Kellogg, well, Dr. Kellogg actually agrees with me somewhat, but in Ellen G. White's view, she has a more traditional understanding of God. But in Dr. Kellogg's understanding, which is more of a pantheistic interpretation, he understands like I do in the sense that God is reality. And anything that distorts your perception of reality distorts your perception of God, which distorts your ability to perceive God and distorts your ability to perceive God's will. So the closer you get, that which helps you perceive reality on reality's terms, exercise, health practices, things like that, helps one to understand things the way they actually are. It helps you understand the flesh, blood, and bone reality, what life actually is. And this is why I think that the Western esoteric tradition in many ways has taken people further away from God instead of closer to it, whereas voodoo takes them closer to God, but to a perverse interpretation of God. The more, there's the tree of life, and there's one tree of life that is above and one tree of life that is below, according to the Kabbalistic tradition. And it takes them to the one that grows below. I forget how to pronounce it. There's the Kabbalah. There's the kind of like the Jedi and the Sith, and they're taken more to the Sith side of things. And that's all for this video. Please look at the links in the description. There's many links to, of course, documentaries on voodoo. I'm using books to gather my knowledge for this, books and the documentaries and the internet resources. And then there's links to voodoo shops that show you the types of ingredients that one would get from a voodoo shop. Links to what goofer's dust is, what's itching powder, different things that are used, tetrodotoxin, what it is, what its role is in zombification, what is zombification. Very interesting things that people should know. There's a list of different root doctors. In fact, I do want to talk about one of them. There's a list of Hiram Page, Bayou John, or there's a link to Hiram Page, Bayou John, and Marie Laveau. But the one that is actually very important that people don't understand is Dr. Sebi. that alkaline diet guy, that actually his diet is very similar to that German guy that created the mucusless diet. But he goes further with his different herbal formulations and stuff. He is technically a root doctor. He is a voodoo doctor, with maybe not an adherent to the religion of voodoo, although I think he probably was. But you have to understand, these people are not necessarily practicing things that are bad for people. There's another guy, Bernardo Lapallo, who lived quite a while. I'll leave a link to him. His father was a root doctor. His father was the reason he lived as long as he did, by telling him to avoid certain meats and to avoid excessive consumption of meat, excessive consumption of cheeses and things of that nature, and to follow a relatively plant-based diet, only to eat small amounts of white meat, chicken, things of that nature. And his granddaughter is a lovely person. I like how interactive she is if you talk to her. And I'm actually going to give her channel a shout out. It's, oh my gosh, Live More, I think. Something Live More. She's a wonderful young lady. Not young, she's older than I am. But she's a wonderful lady that's doing a very good job at promoting her grandfather's work. And I'm certainly going to leave a link in the description of Bernardo Lapallo's granddaughter's work to try and, promote what he promoted, to help people live happy, healthy lives longer, live life longer and healthier and better. And Bernardo Lapallo is personally, he's an inspiration to me, and I will definitely be leaving a link in the description for his granddaughter's channel. And that's all for this video.